He humiliated me at our anniversary dinner. So I sent him to prison before desert. He stood up at our anniversary dinner and toasted to the wife who never had a clue. So I gave them all a reason to choke on their champagne. 5 years. That's how long I was married to Nathan Brooks, local entrepreneur, co-founder of a boutique marketing firm, and from the outside, a golden husband. He dressed well, tipped generously, always remembered birthdays, and smiled in every photo like he'd won the lottery marrying me. And I believed it. For a while, I was a professor at Summit Hills College, focused on literature and quietly grading essays in our shared office while he built a brand empire. I didn't have time to be suspicious. I had syllabi and student emails, coffee dates with department chairs, and lecture prep that kept me up until midnight. I wasn't naïve, just trusting. But that night's our 5th anniversary. Nathan made me the butt of a very public joke. He'd rented out the private room at Maison Belle, the upscale French place just outside Asheville. White brick walls, vintage chandeliers, string quartet in the corner. That kind of money flex place. Before we go further, don't forget to like this story, hit subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss what happens next. Everything looked perfect. Dozens of guests, all people I assumed were our friends, business associates, his college buddies, a few wives I barely knew. My sister Rachel was there, sitting 2 seats down, eyes flickering nervously every time she looked at me. Nathan clinked his glass. The room hushed. He stood, smiling like a man with a secret he was about to unwrap. Then he raised his champagne flute and said, "Here's to 5 years of marriage to a woman who never asked too many questions, who never snooped, who let me do my thing, to the wife who never had a clue." Laughter. Light at first, then growing, some nervous, some knowing. Rachel stopped breathing. I felt it. The whole room's chest burned, not from embarrassment, from clarity. Because in that moment knew, not suspected, knew, there was someone else, maybe multiple someone else's. And this dinner, it wasn't a celebration, it was a performance. One where I was the fool. Except I wasn't, not anymore. I stood up slowly, picked up my purse, walked calmly around the table, heels tapping on the marble like a countdown. People thought I was leaving. I wasn't. I reached Nit, stood beside him, smiled back at the crowd, and slid a black leather folder across the table. "Actually," I said, voice calm, "I've got a toast too." The Nathan's smile faltered. "This is for the woman who was never supposed to figure it out. The one who cooked dinner while you texted Kelsey. Who paid your firm's tax bill with money from her own savings account. The one who trusted you while you forged her signature on a prenup you never told her existed." The room went still. Nathan opened the folder. Inside is screenshots, bank statements, text messages, copies of legal document, my notes, mine evidence, everything. Rachel stood up, quietly, walked to the other side of the room. Nathan looked at me, then back at the pages, then at me again. "You? How did you?" "I may teach literature," I said, "but I read more than novels." The guests began to murmur. Someone near the back whispered, "Oh my God," another woman, Sophie Greer, one of the wives, opened her phone. At that exact moment, everyone's phone started buzzing, simultaneous dings. Notifications. Her dropped folder. Titilla. "What he did while you watched her smile." I sent it the second I stood. Screenshots of the messages he sent to Kelsey Maddox, his so-called business assistant. "She's so clueless, it's boring. Can't wait to take her name off the accounts and replace her with you. And my favorite. I'll tell her after the anniversary. She deserves a nice dinner first." Nathan grabbed my wrist. "You think this makes you look strong?" "No," I said. "What's coming next will?" But then I looked at Rachel. She nodded. Across the room, the door opened and walked Harper Vaughn, my lawyer, hair in a tight bun, all black suit. Calm, like a panther who didn't need to growl. She handed Nathan a thick envelope. "Mr. Brooks, you've been served." The whole room gasped. Someone actually dropped a fork. The rest is a blur. Nathan yelling, Sophie cursing under her breath, Rachel guiding me out like a bodyguard. Outside, the air was sharp and cold. Rachel turned to me. "Are you okay?" I smiled. "Never better." Then we got in the car and drove away. You see, they always think the quiet ones are weak. They think the ones who forgive are blind. That grace equals ignorance. That kindness means we'll never strike back. But we watch. We take notes. We wait. And when the moment comes, we burn the whole illusion down with a smile on our face. He thought I was just grading essays while he texted his mistress. I was building a case, line by line. There was never one big moment. No lipstick on a collar. No perfume in the car. No late-night text that lit up while he was in the shower. Just a series of little shifts, like the fact that he started wearing cologne to working lunches, or that he changed his phone password and then lied about it, or that he started ending texts to me with a single word. Busy. I wasn't suspicious at first. I was tired, teaching full-time at Summit Hills College while chairing the curriculum committee, and mentoring new professors left me barely enough energy to brush my teeth at night, let alone chase red flags. But you know what they say, when something itches at your gut for long enough, eventually, you scratch. It started on a Tuesday. I was home grading papers when I got a fraud alert email. One of those "Did you authorize this purchase?" messages from our joint credit card. The charge, the $124 at Lamarche Jewelers. We hadn't had a holiday or anniversary recently. I sure as hell hadn't gotten new jewelry. When I asked Nathan about it later that night, he said, "Oh, that must be a billing error. I'll call them tomorrow." I nodded and quietly printed the email. That's when the archive began. I bought a leather document case and kept it in my office, beneath the bottom drawer under a fake floorboard. The kind of thing paranoid professors use to hide exam keys. It was poetic, really. Inside, I placed that first receipt. Then I started collecting more. A text I slashed briefly on his Apple Watch. "We should celebrate again soon." From him I knew, business account. He opened in the name MBK Creative Ventures, a hotel charges he claimed week he was at networking retreats, 2 dinner reservations at Maison Belle, one of which I remembered being out of transfer laundered, labeled for $1,000, that I never saw land in our transfer for laundered project bonus for life tolerance. I didn't questions. Tooge whined and asked questions. I smiled. I cooked. I kissed him goodnight. And I kept adding pages to the folder. Then came the prenup. I didn't even know we had one. When we married, we agreed not to sign anything formal. We didn't have much, just student loans and hand-me-down furniture. But one night, while looking for a copy of our marriage license, she's to help Rachel with some travel paperwork, I found a thin folder in our fireproof safe labeled Brooks Caldwell Agreement. I opened it, nearly dropped it. It was a prenup. Signed. Notarized. Except the signature. Not mine. Not even close. And the notary fake. The stamp didn't even match the state requirements for North Carolina. I checked the registry. This was fraud. My signature had been forged on a legal document that said, if we ever divorced, I was entitled to no claim on current or future business assets or income. A clause that would have stripped me of everything. The joint investments, the home, the accounts I helped build. I sat there for an hour staring at it. Rage didn't come right away, just silence. The next day I called Harper Vaughn. Not just any lawyer. A former student of mine from my early years at Summit Hills. Now one of the sharpest civil attorneys in the state. I didn't even have to explain everything. I handed her the fake prenup and said, "I think this is just the start." As she flipped through it expressionless, then looked up and said, "This is felony level forgery. If he tried to use this prenup in court, it's game over, and that's before we get into fraud or financial misconduct." That night, I went home and told him I was thinking of starting a journal for a creative writing class. He smiled, said it was a cute idea. I started a burner Google account under the name AmITheA and uploaded scanned copies of everything, screenshots, account numbers, calendar cross-checks, photos of texts. By the end of that month, the archive was 62 pages long. By month 2, it had 91. Rachel started noticing. "You okay?" she asked one night as we made tea in my kitchen. I nodded. "I'm writing a story." "Fiction, no," I said. "But it's got a hell of an ending." The final piece came from a message Kelsey sent Nathan. One he forgot to delete from his iCloud sync. Of the 2 of them in my house, in our bed, she was laughing. "Do you think she has any idea?" Nathan, "Not a clue." "That's the best part." She, "You're going to destroy her when you leave." "Aha, she'll be fine. Women like her always land soft." That night, I called Harper again. "I'm ready," I said. "Then let's give him the dinner he's been planning." She replied. We set the date for the dinner party on our 5th anniversary. Nathan loved a scene, and if he wanted one, I was going to give him one he'd never forget. We planned every detail, the public humiliation, the legal envelope, the real-time airdrop to every guest in the room, the cameras, the backup copies of all documents, the federal fraud report for the fake prenup, the financial disclosure packet sent directly to the Federal Revenue Bureau. I didn't just want out. I wanted the truth to be documented, out loud on paper, and witnessed by the same people who once praised what a great couple we were. So no, I wasn't clueless, I was patient. And now, I was prepared. He thought he was untouchable. We were already halfway through the paperwork to bury his empire. When Harper and I sat down at her downtown office in a Cheval on the Monday after I found the forged prenup, she pulled out a yellow legal pad and wrote one sentence across the top. What does he think he owns? Not, what does he actually own? Not, what's fair? But what does he believe is his? Because that's what would hurt when it disappeared. Nathan had built his marketing firm, Northbar Creative, on a smoke and mirrors foundation, fancy branding, flashy investors, overinflated promises, but the structure, all his, legally speaking. Except that it wasn't. Because while Nathan thought he had protected himself with a prenup and separate business accounts, Harper discovered something brilliant. A series of early investment transfers, small quiet wire payments that came directly from our joint checking account during the firm's launch year. $400 here. $800 there. A single $7 payment label equipment procurement that I'd signed off on because he told me it was for a freelance editing studio. All of them logged, tracked, time-stamped, all of them marked as co-mingled funds, which meant I wasn't just entitled to a slice of his business. I could argue partial ownership. Harper smiled as she clicked through the files. He built the house on your soil, she said. He just didn't think you'd notice the deed. That week, we filed a quiet motion with the local court, requesting an injunction on the sale or movement of any Northbar business assets until financial disclosures were reviewed. It wasn't loud, it didn't tip him off, but legally, it tied his hands. Next, we reported the forged prenup, not just to a judge, to the Federal Revenue Bureau and State Bar Association, because Nathan hadn't just faked a document. He'd done it while filing it with business licensing applications that claimed personal assets are protected via marital waiver. That's financial fraud. 2 agencies, 3 reports, all backed by hard proof. I didn't stop there. I contacted Summit Hills Credit Union, where we'd kept our joint mortgage. Turns out, he'd refinanced behind my back last year using falsified income projections that included my academic salary but listed me as deceased. Yes, deceased. Harper's jaw clenched when she saw the paperwork. We could put him in prison, she said, and we both knew that was never the original goal. But now it was on the table. Through all of this, I played the part of the unbothered wife. I kissed him goodnight, asked about his day, laughed at the right stories, all while I met with asset investigators, forensic accountants, and Harper's quietly terrifying paralegal, Mallory, who wore blood-red lipstick and smiled every time she found another missing document. But here's the part that made the trap our tight. We didn't just aim for Nathan. We aimed for his network. The investors who had backed Northbar, the firms that used his name as a character reference, the charity boards he sat on, the podcast sponsors who paid for his face, the upstart finance bros who called him a branding genius. I had a plan for all of them. At the anniversary dinner, when I passed out those folders and dropped the airdrop payload, I hadn't just embarrassed him. I'd triggered a cascade of resignations. 3 sponsors dropped the podcast that night. 2 investors emailed Harper's office the next morning requesting formal clarification on the allegations, and 1 board member sent a single-line text. I'm sorry, Tessa. We all knew something wasn't right. The real blow. That came from the one person Nathan never expected to turn on him. His younger brother, Daniel. Quiet. Responsible. CPA in Durham. Family's moral compass. He called me a week before the dinner, said he wanted to meet. We sat at a small coffee shop near the college. He pulled out a folder of his own. Spreadsheets. Account routing numbers. A bank account in Kelsey's name that Nathan had been funneling money into for months. It's not just infidelity, he said. It's embezzlement. And if he goes down, I'm not going with him. He gave me everything. We added it to the archive. The night before the dinner, I sat in my home office with the final version of the folder. 162 pages. Color-coded. Tabbed. Organized by type of violation. Forgery. Commingling. Tax evasion, financial concealment. Corporate misrepresentation. And beneath it all, a single post-it note in my handwriting. Don't forget who he thought you were. The morning of the dinner, I sent a courier to the Asheville County Courthouse. Inside the envelope, a formal divorce petition, Harper's motion for equitable division, a restraining order request on business asset transfers, and a notice of upcoming deposition for financial fraud, all of it time-stamped, all of it irrevocable. So yes, when I stood beside him at that dinner table, while he toasted the clueless wife, I already had every piece in place. The trap wasn't personal. It was professional, and it was done. He raised a glass to his new beginning. By the time he set it down, his past had already collapsed. Mason Bell was humming by the time we arrived. Vintage jazz floating in the background. Glassware clinking like distant thunder. Everything meticulously arranged, down to the hand-rolled butter curls on every place setting. It was our 5th anniversary. Nathan spared no expense. Private room, open bar, guest list full of names he wanted to impress. Investors, clients, influencers, a few local journalists. The kind of people who live for curated success. I wore the green dress he used to compliment me in. Hair done. Makeup subtle. Not because I wanted to impress him. Because I wanted the moment to look as crisp as the consequences about to unfold. He made the first move. He always had to be in control. He stood glass raised, wearing that smug little smile, and toasted to 5 years with a woman who let me build, never asked too much, and trusted me completely. The laughter rippled around the table. I caught a glimpse of Kelsey in the corner, in heels too high and a red dress a little too eager. She tried to hide behind a wine glass, but her eyes were locked on me, wide and twitching. She knew. I stood, calm, smilingly. I said, "I'd like to give a toast, too." That's when the airdrop launched. In seconds, phones lit up around the table. Buzzes. Beep gasps. One woman dropped her fork. A man on Nathan's left tilted his phone, scrolled, and slowly turned his eyes to me, then to Nathan, then back to the screen. The folder named Tia, then AI'd me first. Screenshots, bank records, photos of Nathan and Kelsey outside a boutique hotel in Durham. Timestamp during a weekend he claimed to be visiting his mother. Text threads titled, "Exit Strategy," where Nathan explained, in detail, how he planned to leave me softly after the dinner. And the cherry on top, a PDF labeled "Print-up forged," PF with side-by-side comparisons of his fake version and my real signature. Nathan didn't react immediately. You could almost hear the calculations. Damage control, denial, deflection. But the room turned before he could open his mouth. Harper walked in next, right on cue. Calm, black suit, envelopes in hand. "Nathan Brooks," she said, "you've been served." She handed out copies like party favors. The lawsuit, financial fraud notice, property injunction, court orders freezing business accounts pending investigation. His eyes scanned the documents. His lips parted. "No," he whispered. But it wasn't a denial, it was realization. Kelsey stood up, too fast. "You told me." She started, then faltered as people around her stared, phones in hand. "You said she didn't have proof. You said the print-up was real." He looked at her like she just admitted to murder in front of a jury. "Shut up," he muttered. Harper leaned in. "We're done here," she told me softly. But I wasn't. Not just yet. I turned to the table. The silent audience who once cooed at our holiday cards and called us couple goals. "I stayed silent for a long time," I said. And in that silence, he thought I was weak. But I wasn't. I was watching, documenting, preparing. I looked right at Nathan. "You said I'd never see it coming." "I didn't, but you never saw me coming either." Rachel stood with me. She placed a small velvet box in front of him, our wedding ring, my engagement band, and the ring my grandmother gave me, which I'd worn every day of our marriage. Until that morning, I left it with him. He didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there, surrounded by crumbling partnerships and investors texting their lawyers under the table. As we walked out, a reporter from the local lifestyle magazine turned to her partner and whispered, "This is going to be in the papers by morning." I didn't care. Let it burn. Let every lie he'd ever curated melt under the flashbulbs. The next day, the fallout hit hard. 3 major clients dropped. North Bar Creative, the podcast Nathan co-hosted, posted a statement saying, "Brooks is no longer affiliated with this brand." The Asheville Herald ran a headline, "Power Couple Implodes at Anniversary Dinner Fraud, Affairs and Legal Bombshells." And by the end of the week, Nathan's accounts were frozen. The House title was under review, and Harper had already filed a whistleblower notice with the Federal Revenue Bureau, attaching everything we'd gathered, including the refinanced mortgage under my name marked D. But the moment that hit hardest was a message I got the morning after, from one of Nathan's oldest friends, a man I'd known for years. "You deserve better, and I'm sorry I ever let him laugh about you behind your back." That's when I finally cried. Not for him, for the version of me that once believed him. He spent years building a reputation. I took it down in 48 hours. The morning it happened was strangely quiet. I was in my kitchen, still in a robe, sipping coffee from the blue ceramic mug Rachel gave me after the dinner. The one that says, "Respected, not just married." It had been 2 weeks since Moss and Bell. 2 weeks since I stood in front of a table full of power players and dropped the kind of truth that couldn't be ignored. 2 weeks since Harper filed the federal whistleblower complaint that outlined, in excruciating detail, how Nathan forged my signature, committed tax fraud, and moved nearly $200,000 through illegal transfers. But now it was time for the storm. It started at 9:42 a.m. Harper texted me one word: "It's time." By 10:30, I got the ping from a news alert: "Federal agents execute warrant at North Bar Creative's Asheville office." The article was short at first, just a paragraph about ongoing financial irregularities and documented evidence of fraudulent filings. But the photo, it said everything. Nathan, in a blazer and jeans, walking out of his office in handcuffs. 2 agents behind him, 1 box of files, and a crowd of stunned employees watching from behind the glass. The moment hit hard. Not because I felt joy, not because I wanted revenge, but because it was real. After everything, the lies, the gaslighting, the public embarrassment, The world finally believed me. Let me take you back. The night after the dinner, Harper and I filed the final packet with the Federal Revenue Bureau and North Carolina State Financial Crimes Division. It included a notarized statement from Nathan's brother Daniel, confirming insider knowledge of the fraudulent wire transfers, a forensic analysis of Nathan's personal bank statement showing phantom clients, the fake prenup document traced to a template used in a 2011 court case, with Nathan's handwriting in the margins, mortgage documents showing my name listed as deceased on the refinancing application. Text messages from Nathan to Kelsey that read, word for word, "She'll never know. I've locked her out of everything." Turns out, that line sealed it, because intent is everything in financial law, and Nathan's messages confirmed he knew what he was doing. Within 48 hours, the Bureau confirmed receipt. Within 6 days, a forensic audit began, and by day 12, the warrant was signed. I didn't go to the office when they took him in. I didn't want to gloat. I didn't want to see the man who once promised me forever being walked out like a common criminal. But I did go to the courthouse the next day, not for closure. Inside the hearing room, Nathan sat at the defense table, hair disheveled, teeth crooked, face pale. He looked around like he expected someone to come save him. Maybe his investors, maybe Kelsey me. I didn't even flinch. I sat in the second row behind Harper. Quiet. Quiet. Whole. The charges were read aloud. Fraud, forgery, falsification of legal documents, tax evasion, bank fraud, identity manipulation. A bail was denied. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Nathan looked at me once, just once. I didn't nod, didn't blink, just stared back. And then he turned away. That night, the story hit regional news. Well-known as civil entrepreneur arrested in multi-agency financial investigation. The article didn't mention me by name, but it did say, the investigation began following evidence provided by a whistleblower who had been married to Brooks at the time of the alleged misconduct. Rachel read it aloud, then clinked her wine glass against mine and said, he underestimated the wrong woman. The calls started flooding in after that. Women I barely knew. Professors from Summit Hills. Clients of North Bar. Even a woman who used to clean our house once a month and said Nathan had always seemed like a snake. They weren't asking for gossip. They were thanking me, because I'd done something most people never do: expose a man who wore respectability like armor, and show the world what he really was. Sophie, the socialite from the dinner party, texted me 3 days later. I watched it all fall apart. You didn't say a word louder than necessary. Power move. That's the part people never understand. I didn't have to scream. I had the receipts, and receipts don't yell. They whisper, then echo. As for Kelsey, she disappeared fast, deleted her socials, went off-grid. Harper told me she quietly reached out to the Bureau to cooperate. She's not facing charges, for now. But her reputation, gone. I never hated her. Not really. She was just another woman who believed a well-packaged lie. I had been her once too. 3 weeks later, I sat alone at Cypress in Pine Cow, the one Nathan used to hate because it took too long to get a lap. I brought my laptop, opened a blank document, titled it, "The Wife Who Knew Too Much," and I started to write, not for revenge, for record, because stories like mine get swallowed. They get softened, sanitized, silenced. But not this time. They thought I fell apart. I didn't. I took notes. It's strange, waking up with no one to answer to but yourself. No silent tension in the bed beside you. No second guessing your tone. No asking for space in your own home. Just sunlight, a warm mug, and silence that feels like freedom, not punishment. Nathan's sentencing was scheduled for early October, 6 months after the dinner, 4 after the arrest, 1 lifetime after I finally walked away from the version of myself that kept shrinking to fit his story. I sat in the second row of the courtroom, calm, heels flat on the floor. He wore a suit, the same one he used to wear to win over investors. But today the jacket looked stiff, too tight across the shoulders, like his entire life no longer fit. He glanced over once. I didn't blink. The charges were read aloud. Forgery, tax evasion, wire fraud, identity falsification, obstruction of legal process, and a half-dozen more financial crimes that would make your head spin if you weren't holding receipts. His lawyer asked for leniency. Cited mental strain, poor judgment, overwork. The judge didn't blink. She called it a pattern of deliberate deceit carried out over years with the explicit intention to conceal, manipulate, and financially damage others, including, most notably, me. He was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison, fined, disbarred from any corporate financial advisory roles, ordered to pay $278,000 in restitution. When it was over, he didn't look at me, not because he didn't want to, but because he couldn't. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was a mirror, and some people can't survive their own reflection. I didn't celebrate. I didn't pop champagne or scream into the void or post a victorious quote online. I went home, fed my plants, made tea, sat at my desk and opened a document titled, "The Wife Who Knew Too Much," and I wrote. It turned into a blog, then a newsletter, then a movement. The Iron Clutch. Stories from women who watched, listened, documented, and walked out with the facts instead of just the pain. Not revenge. Resolution. One night, I got a letter, unmarked. No return address. Inside was one sentence written in slightly shaky pen strokes. "You taught me more in silence than he ever did with all his shouting. Thank you." I don't know if it was from Kelsey, or one of the dozens of women who'd messaged me since the story hit the news. It didn't matter. What mattered was this. I'd stopped being the woman in the margins of her own life. People ask me now if I'm angry, if I wish I could go back, if I regret staying as long as I did. And here's what I tell them: I regret nothing. Because staying taught me how to leave with dignity. Because loving him taught me how to love myself better. Because the silence, it was never weakness. It was strategy. I went back to teaching part-time. Still write. Still mentor. Still keep a folder in my desk drawer. Not for him, not anymore. But for me. A reminder of what it means to stay awake in your own life. Last fall, I bought myself a little cottage outside Asheville. 2 bedrooms, wraparound porch, a lemon tree out back, the deed in my name. No Mr. and Mrs. Nonsense. Just Tessa Caldwell, survivor, strategist, and storyteller. Sophie, the socialite from the dinner, once asked me, "Do you think you'll ever date again?" I told her, maybe. But I'm not in a rush. Because for now, I wake up every day knowing no one is lying to me behind my back. No one is shrinking me in my own story. No one is editing the truth while I smile for the camera. I'm not rebuilding from ashes. I'm building from clarity. If this story touched you, share it with someone who remembers those days too.